So how this framework of global to local will work? So what you would recommend for pharma companies trying to get right to make sure it works for Asia?
Yeah, in one word, maybe simplicity. It's not about producing content faster. It's about reducing friction across the full workflow. And in pharma, the main bottleneck is often approval. A lot of time is lost in review rounds, internal alignments, medical and legal checks, regulatory validation, rather than on the content creation itself. That's usually done quite quickly, but we have sometimes 10 rounds of reviews for each function. If we want to have a model that actually works, we need to address that bottleneck. So it starts with a realistic audit of the local market readiness and align those constraints, technology, talent, regulatory stages, and actual ability to execute. Budget as well, obviously, is one of the constraints we have to take into account to build agile localization pipelines. Not one size fits all content farm, which really have failed here, I believe. Content needs to be easier to adapt, validate, and approve. AI can help reducing the rework, making the drafts more review ready, but I think it also has to be done with some changes in the approval workflow by implementing tiered approval processes, for example, because human expertise still has to validate everything before it's deployed. Then roadmaps have to be market specific, leave the tactics, the execution details to the countries. They know how to do that. They don't need global guidance. And another problem is that the technology stacks are often not available locally. Those might be at the HQ level or for mature countries, but limited budget in Asia or limited teams as well, or limited skills means that whenever they are implemented, and they're not always are, they are underutilized and they're not integrated properly. So they still suffer from the same silos as I mentioned before. There's also a lack of investment in the local digital talents, people that actually know how the local platforms work. And we need to rely on that local knowledge to adapt campaigns. And then pilot, build that through sequencing. And when the conditions are right, can expand selectively. So that's how I would recommend to do it. Improve and make it stronger approval workflows, rely on local expertise, be more agile in the execution, and implement market-specific roadmaps rather than global ones. Because in the end, it's not about quantity, it's about the quality, and getting it done and getting it approved fast without the increased risk.
You know, how amazing. So there's a lot of points in this framework to consider. And knowing all this, I believe there's very possible to get into the successful model working in Asia. As well, the technology stack must be ready and support all these changes along the content supply chain. Gwenael, so there's a lot of failures we have discussed already. From your experience working with global pharma, so what are the challenges within the global pharma companies who already have global to local model of collaboration in place? So what do you think?
Yeah, and first of all, Natalia, what I want to raise, there are some model that works in global pharma in Asia. I can list a lot of successful global pharma in Asia. Now, I'm more on my side, and this is where also we complement. Bruno have a longer experience in Southeast Asia. You have my global pharma experience was more focus on China. So one of the trap when you are, especially I was in a very successful pharma in Asia, is if it works in China, it works everywhere in Asia. And this, I can tell you, usually doesn't work because China by itself is a region, is a continent. I'm less expert in India, but I know it were the same with a totally different healthcare infrastructure as we spoke. But this is, I would say, an obvious point, same for Japan. So you have always not one fits all, the average, your view. Sometimes find clusters that are not that obvious or logical in terms of geography, like South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore work together because they have the same, and geographically doesn't look very obvious, but it can work together. Maybe some Southeast Asia, according to their also medical needs on the specific therapeutical area. So this is one. Second one, to be also a bit more specific on the content supply chain, content factory model. I have experienced also those very global content factory model when I would say there is a high correlation of your distance to the global decision center. So I would say the more, the further you are from the global center, the least well equipped you are, because data model super globally governed and centralized. So I'm a big, on my side, what I learned, I'm a big supporter of having those content factory model at more regional scale in a lighter. Of course, you need unification, you need a global template because you want to avoid duplication. You want to have also a unified USP on your campaign. But I think those models work better with a dozen of country clustering rather than 100. And this, in terms of content usage, that's really something I'm a true believer. Knowing that 10 markets in Asia can add up to hundreds of millions of people. So we are not talking about a small market here. And the last thing I would like to raise is also the importance to leverage the local expert community. Whether it's HCP, patient group, can be in different form. But what I have seen in my experience, that usually the global pharma affiliates spend a lot of their medical budget on inviting global KOL or sending their own KOL to a global congress. So I will now, with the experience accumulated, I will say spare part of this budget to uplift your own local expert, local community, to raise their voice, because those local experts, what we call now a digital opinion leader or medifluencer or whatever, will be the key to change the practice at local level, and will be much more impactful than if you invite an Australian or US KOL that, of course, scientifically will be very strong, but maybe if you translate that into a disease awareness campaign for the population, will have much less impact than really raising those local voice. So at DRCOM, we are really a strong believer that we want to, of course, apply some standard process in those, I would say, expert program, but also, I would say, emulate those expert community at a local level.
That's amazing. Gwenael, thank you. So we already started like with this practical recommendation. With out of the podcast, we want our listeners taking some practical tips, the recommendation from you as experts. So making it actionable. If some of the marketing leaders or digital transformation leaders are listening to us, these practical recommendations, how to start business in Asia, how to make global to local work. So that's really important. And Bruno, I would also give you a word so here to tell us from your experience, what would be the practical tip to get these operations in Asia successful?
Yeah. So maybe just to recap a bit, because we've touched upon some practical tips already, but it's the averaging that Gwenael was just mentioning. I think it's important to map markets honestly, digital maturity, regulatory readiness, platform landscape, local capability, and skills, budget. Because once you do that, you quickly see that each market is operating under different constraints. And when you de-average, you make it possible for all markets to follow and adapt. Another one that we discussed earlier is about AI. Use it where it's strong today to accelerate, to adapt, and to gain in workflow efficiency. Don't use it for shortcuts. Keep the humans in the loop whenever there's compliance, scientific accuracy, or cultural relevance that matters. So and third, I would say keep the model simple. Keep it simple, stupid, or KISS. which is an old principle that I think applies here. Not every market uses the same tools, channels, or workflows. So in such constrained environments, complexity becomes expensive very quickly. And we just can't afford that, especially in Southeast Asia. And fourth, so we talked about the local platform knowledge and local expertise, that there's some very good ideas locally. We can leverage credible healthcare voices. Why not leverage TikTok whenever that's possible? That's a channel that originated in Asia, short video formats, gamified scientific experiences. We do that a lot in the Philippines, for example. They like to play, they like new things. They're quite playful over there. It works maybe less in other mature markets. Those local ideas rarely come from HQ, and they come from people that truly understand the market, and they make a difference. And finally, I would say, do not wait for the perfect model. Start with pilots, learn fast and sometimes fail fast, but build iteratively, because in Asia, that works well and works better than a complex model. It's one that's realistic, flexible, pragmatic, close enough to the market to spot opportunities that others will miss.
Bruno, how amazing. So we are all talking about the great formats and new channels which are specific for Asia. And also, I would like to add from my side, so whenever we are going from global to local model and bringing technologies and services, and especially in the content place, we have to take care about the connectivity. We need to break the silos. We need to connect with the local formats. We need to connect with the local technology, and how it's also one of the ways to connect with the culture and to bring the message to the clients where they are in continuum. So this is what we are doing here as well. So thank you so much for this summary.
But I want also to anchor what is obvious, because we are talking about knowing Asia, and even we have experience. We are not Asian. It's quite obvious. Even we try to be as much plunged into the culture. For me, one of the key recommendations is the way you will select your talent and people on the ground. Want also to raise that even before we talk about it. The averaging, select your battle, cannot go big pharma. They can be a bit everywhere. Even we see that they have to also select their battle in terms of product portfolio. Sometimes they outsource to distributors, to other vendors, but that's the investment into the expert local team, rather than trying to manage all at a central level, will be key. And relying on this expertise, so building trust comes with delegation. I would say also go to the market with them will be key. But for me, and that's what also I experience in my China years. If the company I was so successful, is because it was plenty of local talent. This is fair. And want to echo again, and maybe I'm repeating here what Bruno said, the test and learn is, for me, the key practice, even more in Asia than in a European market. Don't go too sophisticated at once. When I arrive in China, I want everything to be super perfect, like squared, BCG method, etc. It doesn't work there. So better go a bit imperfect, then iterate and improve, rather than to try to go perfect.
That's very important, because this experience talk is very important for our listeners. So this is how we are trying to avoid the common mistakes and really to implement the working model in Asia. So that's absolutely great. And now we go to this favorite section, hot or not. So where I will just make a statement which requires a very short answer. It's yes, I agree, I approve, I support. Not, it's absolutely not supportive. So I will give you each one statement, and you will say hot or not. If you want to give some short explanation why, also please go ahead. So let's begin. Bruno, AI will solve the localization problem in Pharma.
It will help. Sorry to violate your rule on the first try, but I don't believe it's a magic bullet. And the answer is not entirely a no. So it's in the between. It will help.
Thank you. Gwenael, if your content works for Europe, it will work for Asia with a good translation.
Not. Absolutely not. Culture is even more important than language. And
Excellent.
to understand the different background, how an emotion works in Asia, in Southeast Asia versus North Asia, is definitively something that even more important than translation. Translation can be easy with AI, but so not.
Absolutely not. Great. Bruno, the statement for you. Human oversight of AI in pharma is non-negotiable.
I'm very hot on that principle. Humans trust humans. We haven't, I think we are not there yet at trusting machines blindly, I hope.
Yes, so we are all hopeful on that effect. Gwenael, for you, digital channel fragmentation in Asia is a competitive advantage for companies that learn to navigate it.
100% hot. It requires a lot of effort and humility, I would say, as I was saying, to be surrounded by the right expert on the local level. And also to have the humility saying that, yeah, you don't understand, or maybe it's not the time for you to get into that market because you have other battle to play. So yeah, hot.
Great. That's absolutely amazing. Bruno, global pharma teams understand Asian markets well enough to navigate and lead digital strategy from headquarters.
Not, absolutely not. It requires no explanation.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, they work with different tech stack and different principles from the start. It's skewed towards that ecosystem. So the fragmentation requires that adaptation, and we're not there yet.
Hopefully, the people from global headquarters will be hearing this out and will take a note that for Asia, we need a different approach. Gwenael, the last but not least for you, the biggest barrier to AI adoption in pharma is technology.
Not. Can be some technology barrier, but the main one, and I will not surprise, is human adoption and usage. So it's a wide change management that we have to proceed, and also convince the user of the benefits they will take out of it. So for me, it's the main current barrier is about usage and human adoption.
That's absolutely true. And so here we are, a grand finale. We have a final block in our conversation, so over. And I am so grateful for both of you, Bruno, Gwenael, for being with us, for being with our listeners of Pharma Talks. So I absolutely believe that there are more questions of our audience are left behind this series of the podcast. So I absolutely invite everyone who has questions, who wants more than a practical tip from our guests, Bruno Senouci and Gwenael Meneux, and myself, Nataliya Andreychuk of V7. So please follow DRCOM, follow V7, and give us your questions. Thank you very much for being with us, and goodbye.
Thank you,
for
Nataliya.
invitation.